Welcome, everyone, to the September board meeting of Ignite CDA. If we'll all rise, please, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any public comment? Please come forward and state your name and address.
You said my name and address?
Yep.
Karen Hansen, 1200 La Crosse.
Welcome.
Hi. So I brought this up at the council meeting last night, and they kind of said it was very vague. I'm not quite sure where we stand, but I'm talking about the meeting that the city council had, and they voted on the priorities list. Are you familiar with this one? And it had to do with the BLM land and the Atlas project. And the city council listened to the public and prioritized how they wanted the sequence of things to be funded. From what I understand, and hopefully I can get some clarification from you guys, you just decided that even though the La Crosse Park, the parking lot, the restrooms, picnic shelter, and most importantly, the signal light at La Crosse, you decided to put that on the back burner, and I'm trying to understand why.
The city council priorities aren't necessarily the same as the urban renewal priorities, for one. And
Okay, but
last that I
they
heard,
take
the city
direct-
council was going to fund the light, and we were going to help do something else, which I think is a discussion tonight. So I think that's still a high priority for all of us.
Okay, awesome. So from what I understand, I'm just a normal citizen. I'm not into politics, and I don't understand the system, so help me understand. But the public expresses to the council what they would like, and then the council comes to you and says, this is what we,
That is one way to do it, but the council also can go into their own funds and just pay for something. They don't have to come to us to pay for it.
okay, but the public funds Ignite with taxpayer money, right? So why would Ignite ignore what the public
We have
is
our
wanting?
funding priorities also, which are, the council made very clear to us, their highest priority was Atlas Mill Park. So that's where our priorities are.
And we also have limited funding. I mean, the river district, or excuse me, the lake district, which you're talking about, the funding for that expires in 2 years. So there's a really limited number of funds available and a limited time frame available for funding of that project, as well as all the Atlas project.
So where is the standing right now? Who do I go to for direction of what is happening in that area?
I would wait till after the meeting tonight and maybe the next council meeting, and I think there should be some clarity.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other public comment? Next, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the August 21st board meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the August 21st board meeting and the special call meeting on August 27th.
Both, okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next will be the presentation from HDR for the Health Corridor Master Plan.
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Baker, and I'm with HCR Engineering. And tonight I'm representing the consultant team supporting the Health Corridor Master Plan and Economic Feasibility Study. So tonight I'll just be touching on a brief update to the master planning effort for the Health Corridor. And just a reminder of the project purpose. This comes on the heels of the ULI TAP report and urban renewal eligibility study, and our HDR team was tasked with evaluating the potential community value creation aspects of a proposed health corridor urban renewal district, with the goal of the greater Coeur d'Alene area being the vibrant heart of North Idaho. And with this effort comes critically important team coordination and communication between Ignite CDA, the City of Coeur d'Alene, and also Kootenai Health. So through the project process, the vision for the corridor emerged. This vision is to create long-term public benefit through 5 key initiatives. The first initiative is to improve mobility within the corridor, which includes vehicular, bicycle, and also pedestrian mobility. The second is to provide framework for infill densification and mixed-use development. Also, a goal was to set the path for neighborhood stabilization. And we really heard that the neighborhood toward the south of the district was really a good anchor that we could build upon. And also a goal is to create new public space that people are drawn to within the corridor. And it's also important to note that the master plan allows for both Kootenai Health campus expansion and also community development. So as we presented here to Ignite CDA just last month, here's our master plan. So here we're showing the overall plan of bold moves within the district and the surrounding areas, which includes added density, transportation and multimodal changes, an opportunity to create a strong sense of place that supports both the community and also Kootenai Health. It should be noted that this is an overall vision of the corridor, which can evolve over time due to market changes. An important takeaway here is that the master plan implementation will likely take longer and extend beyond the 20-year urban renewal district. Another update that I'd like to touch on tonight, this is a recent update. So if you focus your attention here to the kind of the southwest corner of the proposed district, in the previous slide, you'll notice that this is the Garden Motel area and adjacent parcels back here. And those parcels have now been updated to be excluded from the health corridor master plan. So in summary, this modified boundary does not include any of the Lake District parcels, and no de-annexation of the Lake District parcels is included in the master plan or economic feasibility study for the health corridor. So diving down into the street level of the master plan, this graphic represents a view down what we call Health Drive. And this view shows and looks towards Kootenai Health for a possible new bed tower that they have going in, potentially going in, and how the new streetscape creates developable parcels. Here we have a bird's eye view across a future park with Ironwood Drive in the foreground here. And the surrounding park, surrounding the park is these structures which represent mixed-use buildings, which will be market-driven development. During the process, we really heard that transportation and mobility improvements within the corridor were key to making this corridor successful. And as previously discussed, so here we're showing some mobility improvements on Ironwood Drive. And really, we'd like to focus here on the walkways and cycle tracks that are buffered from the roadway, by these planter beds here on each side. And this really helps improve safety and mobility of pedestrians. We're also showing 2 travel lanes with a center turn lane and median and some on-street parking. These next several graphics show some of the adjacent streets within the street network next to Ironwood here, such as Lakewood Drive and what we call New Health Drive or Shopko Avenue. These are pretty similar to Ironwood. They provide on-street parking and buffered walkways from the roadway, and also focusing on some greenscape here and that new park that we're proposing as kind of a central gathering place for the corridor. I'd also like to touch on Emma Avenue and also Davidson. We're proposing some pedestrian improvements here with some traffic calming measures as part of these bulb outs that you see here on the sidewalk. I'd also like to mention that an additional traffic study is needed in the future to really help finalize the full transportation vision within the corridor. And to summarize my last slide here, so partnership is really the key to attaining this long-term vision. And the Urban Renewal District is really a step to attain the ultimate build-out, which again will likely take longer than the 20-year duration of the district. The big takeaway here is that with the help of the private sector stakeholders, the city, Ignite, CDA, and Kootenai Health all have committed to help establish major changes in the health corridor over the next 2 decades. I'd also like to mention that the final master plan and economic feasibility study deliverables are scheduled to be submitted to Ignite CDA at the end of this month, and the master plan will be available on the Ignite CDA website sometime during the first week of October. So with that, that concludes my brief update tonight.
Questions or comments? String?
Let's see, in the, that updated map and the boundaries,
Yes.
yep, and and one of my, I guess, kind of concern points was, even though I appreciate the idea of extending Ironwood, and beyond Government Way, but that's not going to happen, so why even? So it looks like that's not even in the long term.
That is outside the boundaries of the district.
Okay,
correct.
good.
Yes.
Do you mind elaborating on Shopko Drive? I understand that was one of the priorities as far as attracting maybe private investment in some kind of neighborhood clusters, mixed use.
Sure, so Shopko Drive runs north-south here on the east side of Highway 95, and we're really envisioning, if I remember correctly here, some mixed-use development over here, and we have some new hotels up here where La Quinta is shown right now, so. Does that answer your question adequately?
And does the master plan present kind of priorities in sequencing?
Yes,
that-
definitely.
okay.
The master plan will include some phasing diagrams of what we think, should come first and the next steps, so that will definitely be included in the plan forthcoming.
Great, thanks.
A quick question. You showed a future bed tower. I don't know, it looked like 4 or 5 stories in a sketch there or something. I guess it's kind of hard to see at this angle,
Yeah,
but
yep.
is that something in the near future, or is that something way off you envisioned? It
I
sounded like
don't
there
know if I
was,
can speak for exactly the timing of that, but that's just a concept that has been discussed with Kootenai Health.
it's something in discussion.
Was it a priority of theirs, or?
Yes, it is. It is a priority, and as for timing, they're not quite sure when they'll pull the trigger on that, but I guess to use a term, it'll be sooner than later.
Oh, so it is something serious in discussion. Okay. Well, great. I think that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comment or questions? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on timing, so as Daniel stated, that the master plan and the economic feasibility plan will be wrapped up by the end of this month, and then we will look to gather a special call meeting for the board in probably the second week of October to go through that in detail, both the plan and the economic feasibility study. Danielle team are already are in process of drafting a draft urban renewal plan that would incorporate the master plan and economic feasibility study, and all that will be coming together kind of that second week of October, and then that would, with board approval, would enter into the city process of going through the planning commission and ultimately to city council for kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down in the December timeframe. So
it
we're
goes
still on
to-
track to
Goes to
have,
city council in the December timeframe for
we're still on track to make a presentation to city council for their decision in December.
Okay, perfect.
I think we would actually make the first presentation at the second meeting in November, according to the schedule with city council, and give them that's when the public hearing would be held on the urban renewal plan, and then they would consider it for approval at their first meeting in December.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Next up, Finance Committee. Mr. Harmon.
Well, of all the years I've been giving the financial report, this is by far the shortest one we've ever had, so it's
great.
probably good news for people that have been observing this over the years. First of all, with the Lake District balance sheet, the assets, the Lake District experienced a $115,137 decrease in cash assets from July month end. Fixed assets, there was no change. In all other assets, the Lake District 2016 Series Note Reserve Account increased by $105 for the month of August. Liabilities and fund balance, the bonds were no change, and all other liability parameters were either unchanged or normal for the month, including the 2% credit due to the yards. Lake District P&L, the Lake District received $32,347, excuse me, in tax increment revenue from the county in August. Agency-funded initiatives, the Atlas Waterfront Project at Welsh-Comer team was $137,432. All other P&L expenditure line items are in line with normal operating month. Moving on to the River District, the balance sheet assets, the River District experienced a $9,564 decrease in cash assets from July month end. The liabilities and fund balance, all liability parameters were either unchanged or normal for the month, including the 2% credit due to the arts line item. The River District P&L, the River District received $5,334 in tax increment revenue from the county in August. Agency-funded initiatives, the Stimson Mill Site Atlas Project Phase 1, $4,600 for Welsh-Comer team, and all other P&L expenditure line items are in line or normal for the operating month. That is the conclusion of the financial report for the month of August.
Thank you, sir.
Moving on to payables. A little more activity here. First payable was for $1,040 to Elam and Burke for basically general legal counsel, the URD, Lake District, URD district initiatives for $440, and then the River URD Atlas initiative was $560 for a total of $1,040. Holly Troxel had legal, general counsel, public requests were, public record requests were $90, and other legal counsel was $1,624. The legal for Lake URD Health Corridor Initiative, Young Avenue Property Transfer and Midtown Project, $3,990. Total payable to Holly Troxel was $5,614. The Health Corridor Master Plan Initiative was a payment of $246,269.80 paid to HDR Engineering Incorporated. This is for invoices number 2, number 3, and number 4. Next up was the City of Coeur d'Alene. We paid $2,866. This was to pay for the broadcasts that we have every month that are broadcast on local TV. Next up was the City of Coeur d'Alene Arts Commission. This is the 2% payment we make once a year. The River District Public Art Transfer was $28,460, and the Lake District Public Art Transfer was $94,351. For a total of $122,811. We have a first half payment to ICRIMP, which is our insurance, $3,356.85. The Atlas Mills Site Initiative, we had a couple of payments there. Welsh-Comer Team Amendment number 5, Regulatory and Public Space Planning, $61,275. And Welsh-Comer Team Amendment number 6, Regulatory and Public Space Planning, $53,170 for a total of $114,445. And last but not least, the Celtis Way roadway revitalization project is about done. I think it is completed now. Contractor Tila Riviere Equipment and Excavation, final payment of $194,785.30. And the City of Coeur d'Alene remaining Celtis funds payable to the contractor following fall seeding effort of $15,000. Final payment on the Celtis Way project total, $209,785.30. All total, all payments for the month of August, September, are $706,187.95. That concludes my report.
Thanks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Lake and River District monthly financials and the Lake and River District payables.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Well, just had a question on the art transfer, so that we do just once a year? Those
Yes.
amount?
Yes, that's correct, right? Once,
Okay.
it's annual payments, right?
Right, the funds are accrued every month based on our tax increment revenues, and then once a year, we transfer every September, we transfer those funds per board approval to the city, for the City Arts Commission for those district funds to be used within the district from which they emanated.
And is that about a standard amount?
It just depends on our tax increment revenues. It's a little lower than it has been in the past following the de-annexations that council did in 2016. But these past few years, it's tracking about regular.
Okay, good, thanks.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, motion carries. Thanks, Mr. Norman. Next is parking. Commissioner Jordan.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I got a fairly short report tonight. I think first of all, I'd like to congratulate Commissioner Chapkus for being elected as the new chairman of the Parking Commission.
Thank you.
Good job.
Yikes.
And
That means he gets the report then, right?
whatever you'd like to do. We didn't use, I used to be the only one on the Parking Commission, but
I know, it used to be quite small.
he could certainly do the report. And actually,
Go ahead.
I have some numbers he got me because I missed the meeting and couldn't be at the one last week, I guess. Anyway, so congratulations on that. I know you'll be a great chairman. And so parking revenue for August was 225,000 in some odd cents. And then that compares to 143,000 in August of 18, so it's way up for the month of August. And then let's see, 242 monthly passes. No, it's 262 monthly passes in McEwen. That's 82 less than last year. But a lot of them are moving up to the Coeur d'Alene Avenue garage, which is kind of what we hope because the rates are just a little bit lower up there and we're trying to spread the parking out. And also, let's see, on those, on the Coeur d'Alene garage in that lower level where we have the secured parking area, we've gotten up to 14 passes there, so it's slowly growing there a little bit. That's the ones that are $50 a month. And also in the new Coeur d'Alene Avenue garage, they're up to 250 passes now, so that's starting to be utilized quite a bit up there now. And so that's the end of my report. Thank you,
Excellent.
Mr. Chairman.
That's excellent. Comments, questions for Mr. Jordan? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Tony, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item is I'd like to invite Mr. John Butler up to kind of give an update to the board on the Midtown Ventures LLC project.
Thank you. Tony called me and asked me if I would come and give an update today. We had hoped that you could be driving up 4th Street right now and the buildings would be tore down. But we had a little bit of a setback. I don't know if you've shared with them, Tony, what it is. We have recently, I guess, found the agreement that we need to find that Tom Capone had signed about 10 years ago, releasing that parking requirement on the junk building. Before that, he had basically said he would not re-sign another agreement, so we would have had to modify our project. So we have now John Magnuson working on it with the city, and we have a meeting, I hope, on Monday with the Capones to explain to them what we need to do so we can move forward. In the meantime, we have been working with our architect, Eric Hedlund, and Chris Pereira. We've been working forward, hoping that we could get to the point where we could, start getting a permit and tear the buildings and move forward. We know there's a time frame that we have to work within, so we're trying to get there, and I hope we can do it. I could elaborate on a lot of different topics here and what it's taken to get to where we're at, but if you have any questions, I'll answer them.
The parking issue is resolved?
It's not entirely resolved, but that we found the agreement that Capone signed 10 years ago saying that they would basically terminate the parking where it is. They have let's see, at that time, LCDC was going to relocate parking within 400 feet of that to help them out, and they have been able to do that. So there should be no reason why we can't move forward. John Magnus has given me an outline of what needs to be done. And so it's not going to stop us at this point, I don't think, so.
Has Capone's been receptive to you? I mean, have they been accommodative, or are they pushing against?
Honestly, I've been trying to get, I mean, it's been an ongoing, I won't say battle, but they have not been receptive to getting back to me. I've tried to run them down to explain where we're at on this. They do know now that we have this agreement, and Tom said he's willing to meet Monday sometime. I hope Tony will be there. I'm gonna have that, try to set up, so. But in lieu of that, I forwarded to Tony what our attorney has said the steps we should take if they will not re-sign the original agreement. There's actually a new agreement that's been drawn up that they should sign, basically validating what they signed before.
So John, that just deals with that parking that's right next to the junk building, is
Right.
that correct? Okay.
That's the on-street parking.
No, it's off-street.
It's off-street.
It's the Junk
Off-street,
Street
it's
parking
on-
lot.
Diagonal parking?
No,
No.
not that. Actually, the city did that to accommodate Capone's
Capone's,
some time ago.
It's the off-street parking.
Got it.
This is right next to the building.
Okay.
It's something that we overlooked in the title report, my fault, and we still would have moved forward, but apparently Idaho Youth Branch gave Tom an easement to use that property while they were doing their new construction to accommodate the parking for their expansion years ago. I don't know why they did that. They didn't get any consideration for it, but they gave it to it. It's kind of a blanket easement around that whole building for parking, but
Was there a term for that?
luckily, we found the agreement in the Boise file, and it's just a long story, but we did find it, so, yeah.
So what was the term of that easement? Was it-
There was no
was no
was
term?
sunset
indefinite, I
clause to
think,
it.
yeah.
Mm,
Wow.
yeah. So,
So if
But-
this meeting is successful Monday, then you have an estimated shovel and dirt time?
I guess Chris could comment on that. I mean, we're going into winter. We'd hope to have everything taken down, the buildings and stuff and starting right now. But it's been 3 or 4 months trying to get this thing resolved, and hopefully we could get that done. If this wouldn't have happened, we probably would have had to have a different plan. And we didn't want to shorten the park up, because I think that's a cool feature that we're going to have at Midtown. So
Yeah,
we
we
like
like
the plan that we have in place. We think it's great. So I hope I think we'll get this done.
Good.
Yep. Yeah, Chris, you have any comments on yeah, so,
So Tony will just give us an update after the meeting?
yeah,
Shoot us an update on how the meeting went?
yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Questions or comments?
Good luck.
Okay, thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, given the next item, given Mr. Butler's comments, currently we have an agreement to negotiate exclusively on the Midtown Ventures project. That started, it's a 6-month timeframe on that agreement. We signed it on April 14th, and it's set to expire on October 17th or October 17th of 2019. Given the current status, I would recommend that we extend that agreement by 90 days to kind of give the developer and the appraiser time to kind of complete the issues that they need to discuss prior to us forming or entering into a DDA, Development and Disposition Agreement. So I would recommend that the board consider agreeing to a 90-day extension of the existing.
Is 90 days enough time?
We hope so, but we can always come back if we need more time. Because we just have to have the DDA in place by the end of that time frame.
Okay. I'd make a motion to extend the agreement for 90 days.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Can we add that you give Tony and I authority to draft that extension and negotiate it and Tony sign it?
Yes, we will.
The second agree to that?
Yes.
Any further discussion? As amended? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries is to extend to exclusively negotiate and extend it.
Next item, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to invite Phil Boyd up to give an update on the Atlas Mill Site initiative.
Okay, thank you, Tony, Chairman Hoskins, and board members. I'll just jump right into it. So I'm going to cover a range of topics here. The first one, the Atlas Waterfront Project is out to bid. You guys might have seen it in the newspaper if you read those types of things. It's set to open on the 24th, and sometime after that, but prior to the 1st, we'll need to have a special call meeting, or Tony and I were planning to have a special call meeting with the board, so you could look at the bid results. Remember, there's 14 alternates, and you could consider your funding, considering the base bid, and considering the alternates on which ones you might think are the highest priority. So when we go to city council, we can provide city council your input on the project.
There's 14 adults?
Yeah. The reason is, as you can anticipate, well, two big reasons. One, the shoreline stabilization project has not been fully funded. So when we originally did the estimate, we were hoping for a grant. The grant didn't come through, so that portion. And then in addition to that, the restroom, we call it the recreational support facility because it got bigger. It has a pump station in it. It's got more toilets in it. It has a future concession area in it, and that's also driven the cost up as well. So I think those are the things the board's going to have to look at and say, well, gosh, should we fund that, or should the city contribute? So that's why, so we started adding alternates to make sure you had the flexibility to award a project that met your budget objectives. The draft blocks sale RFP, remember the plan is for the project to be sold in blocks. That RFP, the draft is to Tony and Danielle. Obviously didn't want to send it to the board until it went through them. So we've had that, and we're going to actually meet tomorrow and talk about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the developer survey results, post-developer meeting and one-on-one discussions. The board might remember that was a key objective of our process, is make sure we're reaching out and talking to the developers. So we did that, and also want to briefly talk about the Mount Hink study that has been ongoing, continued to collect data, and I'll show you that here in a second. Just a little bit of a refresher. You guys might remember I presented the development standards before. We had a workshop. Heartland, our subconsultant, the real estate advisory group, has had direct contact with the developers. We have kept it that way. So all the contacts with developers have been through the real estate people. So if somebody calls me, I send it to them. If someone calls Hillary or Tony, we send them to Heartland. It kind of keeps an arm's length discussion from them. And then developers all had this development standards. And the objective was here is to ensure that, one, we had sufficient demand for the land uses. Two, we were kind of giving them the opportunity to say, you guys are crazy, or why did you do it this way, or did you think of this? And just give us feedback, because we want to be able to hit the street, we being Ignite in the City, hit the street with a really solid product. And obviously generate sales on it. So Heartland went out and did that. And on the first question, developer interest by use, so you see there's townhome, single family, low rise, which is multifamily condo, retail, and office. And so this column of available is what the development standards indicate what's available. And this column of interest is what the developers told Heartland that here's kind of what we might be interested in. And you can see the townhome line shows that there's not a tremendous amount of demand for that. Currently, there's a huge demand for single family. Low rise or multifamily, there's a huge demand for that. And as we had anticipated, a pretty small demand for retail, and a pretty good demand, better demand for office. The point of this is to, as best we can, provide the opportunity for them in the development standards for those products to be achieved out there. It's a little bit challenging to do single family at that quantity because there's just not enough land. The other thing that happens is the residual land value of single-family, again, according to Heartland, is not as high as townhomes. The townhome lot will sell for more than a single-family lot of similar square footage, or on a square footage basis. So, and you don't achieve the density with single-family, and part of the idea is to have a sufficiently dense neighborhood that you're creating a place as opposed to some big single-family neighborhood, something different than that. So, again, we're going to talk with, I've got a meeting with Troy and Tony and Hillary to kind of work through these in details and figure out, does it really change our development standards? Should we do something different? And I'll show you something here with some suggestions in it.
One quick question, going back to that slide. Has there been much discussion about project, various parcels, if they're going to be rental spaces or sold spaces, owner occupied versus rent?
That has not been discussed in the development standards.
Okay. Because there's a different value there too.
Yeah, good point. Developer interest by block. So the green is where there's lots of development interest and the red is where there's not. No surprise that everything fronting the park has a lot of interest to it. A little bit less interest up here. You might recall that this parcel was initially conceived as commercial, but there are options in it for it to be single-family, multifamily, or mixed use. This was conceived as multifamily and single-family. This is the only location where kind of serious rental product, multifamily, was envisioned. All the other areas that we show multifamily, it's combined with a mixed-use product. So it's just not a standalone apartment complex. And then this was conceived as either a retail, grocery store, office, or single-family. And then a little bit less interest over here, which this one surprises me because we'll actually have a really great view over the park. And some of that is just once the developer gets on site and sees things, they will have a different reaction, we anticipate.
Let's see, a question. At one point, there was kind of in the middle of that, like space for a restaurant kind of thing on the way. Is that still in the mix? Or?
Excellent. Councilman English, that parcel does not show up on this drawing, but it is in all the other ones, and you'll see it here in a second.
Okay.
I apologize for it not showing up on here. It's kind of the premier parcel because it's right along the park. It is along the river, and it is also a topic of parking discussion that I'll get to here in a second. And this is kind of the segue into it. City obviously has parking standards. Believe it or not all developers want to try to do what they can to minimize the parking because it actually comes back and hurts them. And I think you guys might have heard that in some of the discussions here where they don't want to underpark a project because it doesn't bode well for their next phase. And so this is what we heard from them on the residential side, pretty darn close to the city standard, interesting on the duplex, but not surprising that they think there should be one more unit on a duplex, one space per dwelling unit. On the commercial side, this is where it gets challenging, and the simplest way to describe this is with the city standards, you're promoting big parking lots, and so think of Riverstone, those are big parking lots. You have on-street parking as well that's available. And at Riverstone, where there's a little bit less single-family residential or townhomes there, when the streets get filled up, there's probably not a bunch of angst about it. Now think about La Peep and that Belle Rive corridor and the angst that the council has gone through there, where the residents are frustrated that the commercial facility is underparked, meaning there's not sufficient number of spaces, and so they're parking in the residential areas, and the residential people think, well, those are my parking spots, which they're not, but that's the belief. The challenge, though, is when you are attempting to sell that parcel right there, which is a really premium parcel, and as the buyer, your choice is, gosh, I can put a 15,000 square foot building in there, which is just a perfect size, but I can't fit all my parking in there. So now I'm going to have to put a 10,000 square foot building in there to accommodate my parking, and gee, that doesn't fit my uses, and so I'm not going to buy the parcel. early on, when we first talked to the Planning Commission, we were thinking that we would go after deviations through the PUD from the standards. So back to this, rather than meeting the city standards and having 2 parking units per townhome, we wanted to put 1 on the lot and 1 on the street. And that's how we would satisfy them. And that kind of discourages a vehicle-centered development. It kind of pushes people into, you have a higher density, but you're trying to push people into not necessarily doing the car thing. That was poorly received at both the Planning Commission level and I think virtually every single council person that watched the Planning Commission, because I got a call from a lot of them that said, "Are you out of your mind?" So we have backed off on that, especially since what we have heard from the developers, that they're okay trying to satisfy that on lot. The one that we still struggle with a little bit is the commercial side of things. And so I anticipate after tomorrow's meeting with Hillary and Troy and Tony that we will probably go forward to the Planning Commission, suggesting to them certainly on this potential restaurant lot and this potential restaurant lot. So boil it down to a single use. If you're going to come in and make an investment and put a restaurant in there, which would be a really popular feature there, we, the city, will accommodate that by allowing a certain amount of the parking to occur on street. You can see that we have opportunities for diagonal parking there, which drives the count up. On this side, we're contemplating diagonal parking there. And then, of course, there's this 122 lot, parking lot over here.
Sorry, Phil, sorry to interrupt. Can you clarify, the developers were okay with lower off-street parking? They were okay kind of meeting lower parking requirements?
They were okay. In this scenario, they said that the minimum that they would go was 4 on parcel. But remember, when we had the discussion, said, yeah, we need to have at least 4 spaces available to us to make our facilities work. We prefer not to have that on our parcel. We would love for 2 of them to be on street, 2 of them to be on our parcel.
And for residential?
And for residential, they were okay with doing them on their parcel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Phil, when you do the analysis there, you're looking at 4 spots per 1,000 square feet, correct?
Correct.
Is that all interior square feet, or is that including exterior?
Just the building.
Just the building?
Just the building.
So it seems like the problem that you run into is in the summer, when you have all this outside deck area, that, doubles the size of the facility.
I think that the city actually counts the deck area. I misunderstood your question.
So they
Yeah.
do include the exterior?
Correct, yes.
That seems like that's why La Peep always has the issues.
Yeah.
You have the exterior.
The other part of it too, and this is kind of, when you get into downtown, it's classic restaurant or retail management, managing your employees to park where they should park. They shouldn't park up in the diagonal spaces here. They should park over here and walk to their work, which is the success of the parking garage, 250 employee parking. I have 30 of them or something. But you're welcome. Yeah.
Thanks for your business.
But that's the key thing, is managing your employees to not be parking on the street, and that's the same thing that would be here. So I guess I'm kind of rolling out that long-winded dissertation to just get the board's take, and this is a combined city and Ignite project that's going to move forward to the Planning Commission, and I don't want to roll something out that you guys have a certain level of anxiety over.
Well, some cities, like Portland is an example that jumps out. They've forced developers not to put in enough parking to try and push mass transit and things like that. I don't think we're at that point here in Coeur d'Alene. I think it makes no sense to underpark a project. With those townhouses, if they're built, for instance, with a single-car garage, the garage can count as one of the 2 spaces, and the parking slab in front of the garage can be the second space.
Correct.
So there's options out there.
Correct. And just to chase that thought a little bit more, what Commissioner Jordan said is, we've had those same things. We're not quite there, but we still want to entice the appropriate use to be here, so how do we accommodate it? And so what we did is we went back and started looking at the street section and say, gosh, you know, could we take an additional 15 feet of the park, and instead of having parallel parking along this stretch, we put in back in diagonal parking and drive the count up a little bit. So we're at least telling the planning commission, look, we hear you, and telling the council, we hear you, but Ignite also in the city needs to sell product, and we want to be as encouraging as possible in here. Okay, we'll move on. Just general other feedback, talking about, you know, is it well suited to attract commercial tenants? You guys can read the comments there. This was the mixed use idea, and I mentioned that earlier, is we're pushing the mixed use in the central core. And this is one of the contributions Hillary made early on in the process when we were master planning this, as we were looking at the road alignments and the layout. She really had envisioned that there was this opportunity to create some commercial interest right here, and so we've chased that and added this piece here and then that little corner. Red indicates commercial. You could see the opportunity to have that type of mixed-use facility there. Asking about blocks being broken up to get them into pieces or consolidating them. And then also for residential developers, this was pretty interesting. Single-family for rent and senior housing, which is probably an indicator of the demographic that is continuing to come here. Cottage, affordable, and then just the kind of the price point driven things. So these are Heartland's points, that they think that there's sufficient demand for the residential units. The big thing I was hoping for is number two, is that most of the developers saw that the development standards that GGLO put together were sufficiently flexible. We want to paint white lines on the road, but not so narrowly that the developers are scared and run from the project. Let's see, everybody was kind of thinking about multiple blocks. That's one of the things we've heard early on, is if I apply block one and then when you roll out block two and I've done well on block one, do I get extra points on block two? And those are things we're going to have to work through with Tony and Danielle of, is that achievable, or do we just put block one and two out together at the same time?
Reference points.
Yeah. This was the other key one. All these parcels along here, all these homes here are alley loaded, because the street frontage is so important, because it's public space here. And if we're down there enjoying the public space, when we look across the street, we want to see a nice, cute little home, not an RV parked in somebody's driveway. And it just creates a better street character. And so, but we were worried about it. And so Heartland really pressed the developers on it, and they seemed, you know, didn't matter to them much. And then this was the one point they suggested wider townhome and single-family lots. These lots get down to as narrow as 30 feet for a single-family, or for a townhome lot. I'm not sure we're going to make them wider than that, because this goes back to the early math. When you pull out the premier piece of property, you still have to generate enough density and enough revenue for the Ignite to reimburse the city and to do all the things we need to do. But we'll look at the math and see.
So Phil, clarity there, if we're selling it by the square foot, what difference would it make if they're 30-foot or 40-foot lots? I mean, you're going to have more houses or more density as far as structures go.
So if you have more housing and more density in that parcel that you sold, if you were a developer and you sold it, you probably don't care much. If you're Ignite and you're counting on increment,
Your increment's going to be basically the same if you build a $400,000 house there, or I guess I'm looking at that footprint versus a, you know, two $200,000 houses. It's the same increment. I mean, X you're going to have the homeowner's exemption, you know, twice, I guess. That'd mean the one thing.
Well, when Heartland ran the numbers, and we iterated and iterated and iterated on that very point, we kept having to drive density to develop higher land values, so the increment over time was sufficient for the city, for Ignite to build the infrastructure and reimburse the city. But again, the market will drive what the market's going to drive there. And that's why we might, when we get through our meeting tomorrow, we might make some adjustments to the lot width there. And the developers, one of the things that's in the RFP, the developers will always have latitude to ask us if they say, hey, we want to take a 30-foot townhome lot and go to 100 feet. Well, that's probably going to trigger a visit back to Planning Commission, because we didn't portray that. Say, hey, we want to go from 30 to 32 feet. That might be something that could be accommodated at staff level.
Sure.
If you're on zero lot lines, you can do a pretty nice unit on 30 feet.
Yep.
Zero lot line with no setback.
And
I think the key is to be flexible and see what the market dictates.
Yep. I just threw this slide in here to kind of give everybody a snapshot of where the potential to add single family is. The ones that you see, townhome, multifamily, single family, those exist in the development standards now. So if the market is dictating, and if single family is so popular, one might envision that all of the things that you see that says SF turns into SF. The two green areas here are where we currently don't have single family for a design reason. One I mentioned earlier here about making this a more commercially corner, and this one, it just doesn't fit very well in there because the commercial nature of this one, the mixed-use nature of this corner takes up a lot of space. We could add single-family opportunities here to the development standards, and we could as well over here. The place where we can pick up 20 of them is over here, which is in the Mount Hink space. This is also an unsuitable area. We have been working on a study of this whole, we'll call it the unsuitable corridor that goes from here to there. And that's the area where there was historically these pits. And so the Reader's Digest version of what you're seeing here is we used aerial photographs to replicate where the pits used to be. So photographs going back to the 50s. And doing our best to going out and digging test holes and borings to try to determine how deep they were. You can see here in the cross-section, so this black line represents a cross-section cut through the earth looking north towards Southeast Way. And you can see this pit is relatively shallow, it's 20 feet deep. This pit is 20 feet deep. This pit is 40 feet deep. And then this one is not as, it's 30 or so feet deep, but you can just barely see that dashed line up there. That's the top of Mount Hink. So you can see how much there's 60 feet of material on top of that. So if you were to show this to, a 15-year-old kid and say, tell me what's the easiest thing to do, they would say, hey, you should take care of these two over here and move the material out them. So we have been working on different scenarios on how to deal with this material. If you were to take all the material out of there and fill the pit back in, you couldn't sell the property for the amount of money you just spent on remediating the property. But if you were to take all this material, push it over here, and simply regrade this, and think of terracing it, just regrade that whole site into single-family home sites, you would now have the opportunity to probably remediate it for current estimates are somewhere around $4.50, $5 a square foot. Still might not make a huge amount of money on the initial sale, but remember, Ignite's viewpoint is a little different than a developer. You're interested in the initial sale, but you're also interested in the long-term value of the property because of your increment situation. So that's the path we're currently chasing and developing some layout scenarios there and working on figuring out exactly how to move that material over here cost effectively. And in the next meeting or two, you'll see some more iterations of that. But what we wanted to do is develop an engineering report that if you have a buyer that's potentially coming down here, you could actually hand them that report and say, here's a scenario. It could be that Ignite or the city ends up doing this on their own and remediating it, or chase a grant to help remediate it through the brownfields. But we need to have a report in our hand, and that's what we've been working on to put that science to it.
What's the hope of chasing a grant? That makes it pencil a lot better.
It does, and so you guys remember the name Steve Gill from DEQ. He's the Brownsfield coordinator. Steve wants to get my report in his hand because he anticipates there will be unanswered questions, which there will be, primarily because Ignite and the city, I'll say, couldn't afford to go bore these to confirm where the depth is really, really expensive. And so when we looked at that and looked at the value of it, Tony made the call, gee, let's hold off on that until we have a little more clarity, which is the point of this study. So we kind of did a little mini study. We're doing that study, and if the conclusion is, gosh, we think it's feasible, but we better dial in really where the bottom of these pits are, because as you can see, I've got one shot there, like one there, none in these pits and none in those pits. DEQ has indicated that if there's some unanswered questions like that, they may be able to pursue a study grant that would then go in and bore those holes. And if the material that's in there meets certain criteria, they may be able to help fund remediation of those as well. So that's kind of the path we're headed on. And again, I'm kind of rolling these things out for the board to make sure I'm pointed in the direction you want me to be headed. I think I am, and Tony thinks I am, but we wanted to make sure that you saw this, and if you had any other guidance.
I think you are also.
Okay.
I really do. I
Thank
think
you.
the suggestion of moving the dirt over to Mount Hank makes a lot of sense and making it more marketable.
Yeah.
Or profit still exists there.
Yeah.
So we would make the mountain bigger? And
That's part of the challenge.
mini ski resort or
Well,
something?
and so I'm kind of tickled you asked that question because it's been haunting me in the back of my mind. What we'll end up doing, Councilman English, is we'll end up taking this material in a computer model and moving it out of here and piling it over here into some shape and putting it into a 3D configuration where people can look at it and understand what it looks like. A lot of folks can look at a topographic map and understand in their head what it looks like, but not everybody can. And so once we do that and we show it to folks, and if they say, gosh, that seems ominous and not very desirable, we will have to figure out where else that material can go to. There might be some other opportunities on site to waste it, but it's not super great material.
Do you
Cherry
mind,
Hill South,
I was thinking about that, yeah.
Sled Hill.
back to the question around single family and the blocks where there's a possibility to add it, where it's not currently. So is that reflecting what the developers said, just because they indicated higher demand from what was presented? But what's the Heartland's view on that? Because I'm trying to differentiate what the market will bear versus what the community needs in terms of housing product and options. So I worry about this turning into a huge single-family development just because that's what developers say, maybe because it's their preference of their business model. But I want to make sure we're kind of honest to original intention about this, of ensuring appropriate housing mix for what the community actually needs.
Yep, I anticipate you won't see any single family added there, you won't see any single family added there. And it kind of fits up in here, but this, it could also, townhomes could fit up in here, but I don't anticipate putting it here and don't anticipate putting it back here. The GGLO, Don Vagey, the person that you have met, I think Don would turn himself inside out if we asked to put single family there, because he's really passionate about keeping a certain character there, and he has done these developments all across the nation and in Canada, and so he knows what creates a place, and that's what we're after.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put it out to make sure that the board understood the flexibility that exists there, but I don't anticipate, Commissioner Mandel, that we would bring it forward. You would see that.
Thanks.
Well, wouldn't it change the feasibility study also, because there's a different increment on single family versus multifamily?
Yes, yep.
So we gotta keep that in mind.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Good data.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple more initiative updates. Just update on the Memorial Grandstand renovation. As you see, as you drive by it, the work continues on on the renovation. The contractor has found a few unforeseen issues involving the building's original foundation footings, in other words, lack thereof, and associated rot in some of the support timbers, so they're kind of working through that with the city right now. And according to Mr. Greenwood, the project completion is still slated for late spring of 2020. So they're after it, and like with any kind of renovation project, they're finding some treasures and surprises as they dig into it.
Tony, I saw in the paper that they got a major donation from Idaho Forest Industries for some of the timbers. Was that just a donation, or was that a cost, or what was the background on that?
I do not know.
Okay.
I don't know that. I'll pursue it and get back to you.
I mean, if it was a donation, they should be recognized for that.
Yes.
And I see there's a whole bunch of wood with their wrappers over there, sitting over there.
Yeah, I'm
so-
not sure if that's structural. At one time, I heard that there was going to be a donation for siding, but I just don't know what actually materialized.
Thank you.
The second update is on the Museum of North Idaho, Young Avenue relocation. As you're all aware, there's going to be a groundbreaking event held for the new facility located on the Young Avenue property this Friday, September 20th at 3 p.m. So if y'all can make that, I think that the museum folks would greatly appreciate that. So once again, Friday at 3 o'clock on site on the Young Avenue property. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Tony. Now is the election of the chairman and vice chair.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a nomination. I'd like to nominate you as the chairman for the next year of Ignite CDA. I'd like to nominate Scott Hoskins for chairman, and I'd like to nominate Olivia Metz as vice chairman for 2019-20.
Now, do we need a second, or do we just see if there's any other nominations?
You would need a second, and if there's any other nominations to.
Okay, well, I'll second that.
Is there any other nominations? Do you want to do it?
No.
Does,
No, I was just gonna say there probably won't be
Olivia
any other
Metz want to be
nominations.
vice chair?
I'm
Not here,
happy
so-
to be vice chair.
Normally, when you get put in that position, there isn't really any other nominations.
Well, Olivia's gone today, so that's why
Yeah.
she doesn't
Yeah.
get to.
Thank you, Scott.
That's how Charlie Nipp, our original chairman, was appointed. He was out of town when we had our first meeting, and he was appointed the chairman.
We did talk to Olivia about it beforehand, so, yeah. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Thank
congratulations.
you.
thanks for serving.
Thank you.
Now it's time for board commissioner comments.
Oh, I guess I could say, we had a nice ribbon cutting grand opening ceremony of the NICE facility, or the DeArmond facility at, on the North Idaho College campus on Wednesday of last week, or Thursday? And Commissioner Chapkus was there, Commissioner Arman was there, I was there, and Executive Director Burns was there, and it was a very nice event. And it's a.
Beautiful building.
It's a nice building, and they did a good job using our money to help build that, so that's good.
Thank you very much.
I would just bring attention to the Parking It on Sherman event this Friday evening from 4 to 9. I think every year the city ups the ante a little bit in terms of the activities and the visibility. So that's from Friday 4 to 9. So you could go from the White House ribbon move ceremony and just keep walking east and join the fun on East Sherman.
And I think that it's this weekend, isn't it, this Friday and Saturday, that Riverstone's having their 20th anniversary celebration? Is that correct?
Yes, they are, and also the Think Big Festival is also happening this weekend across the community, so it's a very busy weekend.
Well,
in
we
our
have one other
waterfront
item. The Downtown Association is sponsoring Oktoberfest at the
Oktoberfest.
Plaza Shops. It draws about 2,000 to 2,500 people, Friday and Saturday.
Wow.
That's good. That'll
We need
Big
volunteers.
coincide with the Think Big
Great.
Festival.
Yes. It's a busy weekend.
Thank you. Now also it's time for public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll take entertain a motion for entering into executive session in accordance with Idaho Code Section 74-206.
Subsection 1B and 1C.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we enter into executive session subsequent to Idaho Code Section 74-206 subsection 1B to consider evaluation of a Knight CDA executive director, and subsection 1C to acquire an interest in real property which is not owned by a public agency.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mendel,
Yes.
Norman,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Chapkus.
Yes.
We are in executive session, and that's a wrap.